We are diving deep today into, well, what you might call the secret history of America's purported extraterrestrial cover-up. We're talking about the documents that really kicked off the whole modern mythos, the Majestic 12 papers.
That's right, MJ-12. These documents supposedly lay out this shadow government group, and they're really ground zero for the modern UFO conspiracy narrative. They claim to trace directly back to the Roswell incident in 1947.
Detailing the recovery of alien wreckage and, crucially, alien bodies, right?
Exactly. Alien bodies.
So our goal here, for you listening, is kind of twofold. First, we need to look at these papers, like historical artifacts. What did they actually claim? How did the story get out there? And second, we're going to walk through the pretty definitive forensic evidence that's emerged since then. Evidence that determines their real place in history.
Which seems to point towards perhaps the biggest disinformation campaign ever launched against UFO researchers.
It's quite a story.
It really is.
Yeah.
And to understand how these papers even got traction, you have to look at the time they emerged. They didn't pop up right after Roswell in 47.
No, much later.
Yeah, they really started circulating heavily in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Think about the culture then.
Okay.
This was the era of close encounters of the third kind, ET. The public was absolutely fascinated by alien stories.
Consuming them ravenously, yeah.
Totally. So there was this massive demand for, sensational information. And that appetite, well, it made the environment absolutely ripe.
Ripe for what? Genuine information or?
Well, yes, genuine curiosity, but also ripe for intentional, really sophisticated deception.
Okay, so let's unpack that origin story, because how these documents surface, it really is cloak and dagger stuff. And importantly, we're not talking about original paper documents here, are we?
No, not at all. They first materialized on film, microfilm actually, in the mid-1980s.
How? Just appeared.
Delivered anonymously through the mail to two veteran UFO researchers, William Moore and Jamie Shandera.
So the source was totally hidden at first.
Completely obscured. I mean, the first clue they got was this incredibly strange postcard.
Yeah.
Sent from New Zealand, but get this.
Yeah.
With a return address listed in Ethiopia.
What? New Zealand via Ethiopia? That's bizarre.
Bizarre. But the person likely orchestrating this chaos, was actually much closer to home. Deeply embedded in government counterintelligence.
Okay, who are we talking about?
Special Agent Richard Doty.
Doty. Okay, I've heard that name. AFOSI, right? Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
Exactly. And Doty wasn't just some random agent. His specific mandate, the job he was performing, was explicitly defined as conducting deception operations within the UFO community.
Let's be clear here. Deception operations, that sounds serious. This wasn't just like keeping quiet.
Oh, no. This wasn't passive withholding of information. This was active malicious fabrication, planting false stories, false documents.
It sounds like psychological warfare, almost.
It absolutely was. Doty was notorious for feeding highly credible sounding yet completely false documents and information streams to researchers. There's the famous and tragic case of physicist Paul Benowitz.
What happened there?
Doty relentlessly targeted him with fabricated information about secret alien bases near Kirtland Air Force Base. It contributed significantly to Benowitz suffering a severe mental breakdown.
Wow. Hang on. We're saying U.S. government agents intentionally pushed information they knew was false, leading to the mental breakdown of a civilian researcher?
Yeah, what the record suggests, yeah.
Just to protect a narrative. Why go to such extreme lengths? That seems unbelievably high stakes.
Well, think about the goal. Maybe it wasn't just hiding a truth. Maybe the goal was to completely discredit the entire topic. How do you do that? You mix kernels of truth or maybe just compelling questions with such outlandish, toxic lies.
And the whole field becomes tainted, untouchable by serious inquiry.
Exactly, poisoning the well. And here's where Doty's story gets even more, well, almost unbelievable. He eventually resigned from the Air Force.
Okay.
And almost immediately became a paid consultant.
A consultant? For who or what?
For fictional promotions of the exact MJ-12 narrative he had helped engineer while working for the government.
You're kidding.
No. Specifically, he consulted for the hit TV show The X-Files and Steven Spielberg's miniseries Taken.
Wait, so Doty, the government disinformation agent, literally took the hoax narrative he maybe created or certainly propagated?
And professionally packaged it for Hollywood, cementing the fabricated cover-up story right into the public consciousness through entertainment.
That is stunning. The disinformation specialist becomes the chief storyteller for the supposed truth. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's look at the content he was pushing. What did these MJ-12 documents actually claim? What's the history they presented?
Right, the core claim, the foundation, was the establishment of Operation Majestic 12, supposedly commissioned by President Truman himself, September 1947.
Right after Roswell.
Precisely. And their mandate, according to the documents, was simple but huge. Manage the reality of crashed alien craft and their occupants, which the documents termed Extraterrestrial Biological Entities, EBEs.
EBEs. And Doty's narratives, the ones he fed researchers, really leaned into the sensational stuff, didn't they? Like a live EBE capture.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That was a key part of the lore. He spread a live EBE captured after a crash, supposedly lived until 1952. He also talked about a subsequent treaty signed between the U.S. government and aliens.
A treaty, okay. But if we're talking about government secrets, national strategic interest, maybe the biology wasn't the biggest secret they were guarding.
That's a very sharp point. According to these documents and later accounts tied to them, the key secret, the ultimate strategic asset, it wasn't biology, it was technology.
Reverse engineering.
Reverse engineering.
Yeah.
Specifically, the documents hinted at, and Doty definitely pushed, the idea they were trying to master gravity control, alien propulsion.
Because if you crack that,
you instantly possess limitless silent air travel, maybe even free energy. Think about it. That kind of physics would render every conventional weapon, every conventional energy source, completely obsolete overnight.
so that would be the high-stakes item worth protecting with extreme measures. Not necessarily the body of an EBE, but the physics.
Potentially, yes. And linking this potentially revolutionary physics program to some of history's biggest names, well, that made the hoax incredibly potent, didn't it?
Absolutely. And central to that narrative, one of the highest-profile alleged members named in the documents was James Forrestal.
Right, America's first Secretary of Defense.
And Forrestal's actual real-life story is tragic and mysterious enough on its own, which made him a perfect character for this kind of narrative.
It really did. Forrestal was known, historically, to be highly critical of the growing government secrecy after World War II. He clashed with Truman over it.
Which led to him being forced to resign in March 1949.
Yes, and the MJ-12 narrative implies or states that he knew too much and was silenced because of it.
What happened after his resignation is key here. He was admitted to Bethesda Naval Hospital, officially for depression, exhaustion.
Right, rest. But the circumstances felt more like confinement. We know his visitors were severely restricted. His own Catholic priest was apparently blocked from seeing him 7 separate times.
7 times. That's specific.
It is. Then came his death, May 22nd, 1949. His body was found on a 3rd-floor ledge outside his room. He'd fallen 13 stories.
Officially ruled a suicide.
Officially, yes.
But the details surrounding it are just incredibly suspicious, aren't they? Almost theatrical.
They really are. His bathrobe belt was found tied around his neck. Not tightly enough to strangle, apparently, but tied around his neck.
And the note, the supposed suicide note.
He was supposedly copying lines from Sophocles' tragedy, Ajax, but the lines were unfinished, mid-sentence, mid-thought almost, suggesting he was interrupted.
Interrupted while writing his suicide note.
Okay. And then there's the official reaction, which just poured gasoline on the conspiracy fire. There was no autopsy performed.
No autopsy on the first Secretary of Defense after a suspicious death.
Correct. His personal diaries, which were rumored to contain sensitive information, maybe even about UFOs, they were immediately seized by the Navy.
And when they were finally released years later.
2 years later,
Yeah.
Major sections were just gone, excised. And maybe the most absurd detail of all, Navy officials actually classified the number of windows in his hospital room as top secret.
The number of windows. Classified top secret.
Yes.
That level of secrecy around something utterly mundane, you can see exactly why the forgers, whoever they were, chose Forrestal as a key member in their fabricated documents. His real-life issues made a suicide story plausible, even if staged, and the government's bizarre handling of his death guaranteed this permanent cloud of suspicion.
Making any document naming him seem instantly more believable, more charged.
Right. Which brings us then to the actual forensic evidence regarding the documents themselves, because intense suspicion doesn't automatically make a document real.
Exactly. We need to move from anecdote and suspicion to the hard science of forgery detection.
And what's fascinating here is how the document's origin story, being circulated only on film, immediately created a hurdle for analysis.
It really did.
Yeah.
Researchers couldn't do the standard stuff. No ink analysis, no paper provenance testing, none of the physical forensics document experts usually rely on.
So they had to look inside the documents, at the content and formatting.
Correct. And that's where the internal inconsistencies started screaming forgery. Document experts found serious flaws. For instance, the format.
What about it?
One key document had this weird hybrid format. It was designated as a memorandum at the top, but then it opened with a letter-style salutation like, "Dear Secretary Forstall."
And that's wrong.
That specific combination just never appeared in President Truman's known correspondence from that period. It was anomalous.
Interesting. What else?
The vocabulary sometimes betrayed a more modern perspective, like using the word media instead of press. In the late 1940s, official government communications almost universally used the term press. Media is a much later, more modern term. It's a linguistic anachronism.
A slip-up by the forger.
Looks like it. You also had verifiable dating errors. Mistakes no high-level official or their staff would likely make.
Like what?
Well, the crucial Cutler-Twining memo, which sort of helps establish the timeline of the documents, it was supposedly signed by Robert Cutler on a specific date.
Okay.
But official records, like White House logs, clearly show Cutler wasn't even in the country on that date. He was overseas.
Ouch. That's a big error.
A huge one.
Yeah.
And when investigators looked closely at the physical copies that eventually surfaced photos of typed pages, they found visual inconsistencies too. Like in one document, the numerals in the date line. They were visibly out of alignment with the rest of the typed text.
Meaning?
Strongly suggesting those numbers were typed in separately, probably at a later time, onto a pre-existing or differently typed document.
Wow. Okay, so typos, dating flaws. What about just basic government procedure stuff?
More problems there too. The documents lacked the proper top-secret control numbers and markings that genuine classified documents from that era would have had. They referenced buildings or offices that didn't actually exist yet in 1947. And that core memo, the supposed Truman memo to Forstall, establishing MJ-12,
Yeah.
it has never, ever been found in the Truman Library's extensive archives, despite exhaustive searches. It simply doesn't appear to exist in the official record.
So quite a few red flags piling up. Content errors, dating errors, procedural errors.
Definitely. But how did researchers move from just suspicious to being able to say definitively fake?
Yeah.
That's where things get really high-tech.
Okay.
We're talking computational stylometrics, specifically a technique called alias.
Alias. Sounds like something from a spy movie itself. Author identification.
By linguistic syntactic structure. Yeah, it does sound cool. It's essentially sophisticated literary forensics.
How does it work? Is it just counting words?
It's much more subtle than that. Alias analyzes the deep, often unconscious grammatical and syntactical structures that form an author's unique writing fingerprint. It focuses particularly on the frequency and patterns of function words. Little words like prepositions, conjunctions, articles, and common phrase structures.
And this is reliable.
It's actually been validated in courts of law. It boasts something like a 95% accuracy rate, especially good at telling you who didn't write something.
Okay, so how did they apply alias to the MJ-12 documents?
Researchers took 17 key MJ-12 documents, the ones supposedly authored by big names like Truman, Eisenhower, Admiral Hillenkoetter.
The alleged members.
Right, and they tested the linguistic style of those documents against huge databases of authenticated writing samples from those same men. They were looking for a statistical match in writing style.
And the results?
Devastating. Absolutely devastating for the MJ-12 narrative's authenticity. Out of the 17 core documents tested, only one showed a strong statistical likelihood of actually being written by the person it was attributed to.
Only one. Which one?
A memo known as Twining Q3, supposedly from General Twining to General Shulgin. That one seemed linguistically consistent with Twining's known writing.
But the other 16?
Right.
Including the really important ones from Truman, Eisenhower.
Invalidated. The linguistic evidence screamed forgery. The writing styles just didn't match the known styles of the purported authors.
Okay, that sounds pretty definitive. But here's maybe the most critical takeaway from that analysis, the part that really ties Doty's PSYOP campaign to the actual words on the page.
What's that?
In 8 of those 17 tested documents, 8 of them, the writing style wasn't just not Truman's or Eisenhower's, it was found to be linguistically closest to the style found in the document pool associated with John F. Kennedy.
Whoa. JFK, what does that mean? He wrote them.
No, not necessarily that JFK himself wrote them, but that the style was closest to documents from his era or administration.
That finding is hugely significant, isn't it?
It is, because it doesn't just suggest the documents are fake. It points towards the potential for a single, highly sophisticated forger, or maybe a small, coordinated team.
Someone operating later, perhaps.
Hmm.
Someone who had access to or closely studied high-level government writing styles, maybe from the Kennedy era.
Exactly. It sort of wraps the whole complex deception, the fake content, the internal flaws, the dating errors, Doty's psychological targeting into one potentially massive orchestrated campaign originating from a very specific milieu.
Okay, so let's sum this up. What does this entire saga, this deep dive into MJ-12, really mean for understanding the history of the UFO cover-up narrative?
Well, the forensic science seems pretty clear, doesn't it? The MJ-12 documents themselves appear to be primarily a very sophisticated hoax.
A hoax supported by multiple lines of evidence,
Yeah.
content errors, physical anomalies in the formatting and dating, and crucially, this quantitative linguistic analysis.
Right. So the true history of Majestic 12, it isn't really about the secret group described in the papers. It's the story of how those papers came to be. It's the story of a highly successful disinformation campaign.
Yeah, a campaign where the goal wasn't just to hide a secret, maybe, but to actively flood the information space with plausible, yet ultimately debunkable lies.
But like you said earlier, poisoning the well. Intentionally mixing lies with maybe some grains of truth or just resonant fears so thoroughly
Yeah.
that when or if any actual truth eventually surfaces, it becomes almost impossible to distinguish from the nonsense they already planted. The whole topic becomes discredited.
And that, I think, leaves us with the ultimate provocative question for you, the listener, to chew on.
Which is,
If the government or elements within it were truly willing to go this far, using special agents like Doty, maybe driving researchers to madness, definitely faking complex documents, and ultimately seeding this fake narrative directly into Hollywood blockbusters, what was the actual kernel of truth? What was the real secret, be it technology or intelligence or something else entirely, that they felt they needed to protect so vehemently that it required launching this incredibly complex, multi-layered, decades-long lie in the first place? What were they really hiding?